Thank you all so much for joining us today for a specially called meeting, a joint meeting between the Budget and Finance Committee and our Health and Hospitals Committee. We do have some important information that we wanted to make sure that we got out to both of the committee members. So again, thank you all for joining us today. We will have some information that will be presented from the administration. I'm going to turn it over to Councilman Taylor, who had a few words that he wanted to get us started off with.
Thank you, Councilmember Porterfield. Hello, this is Councilmember Brandon Taylor. Sorry that I did not have my video. Nevertheless, so Councilmember Porterfield, thank you so much first for getting this meeting to discuss JB Knowles and what we're doing there. The administration, Mr. Jameson and Ms. Falls, reached out to myself and Councilmember Porterfield, and as the Vice Chair of Finance, to discuss the bid for RFQ that's coming up for Knowles, JB Knowles. And so in light of the conversations we've had in regards to other facilities such as Bordeaux, we really wanted to get this information out to you quickly. In all fairness, I did have my conversation early. This information is extremely new because I had my conversation today. Councilmember Porterfield did a great job of getting the meeting scheduled quickly so we could get as much information out to the committees as possible in such a quick manner. But one of the things I did want to add is we're going to be able to talk with Ms. Falls and Mr. Jameson today, and I've had a ton of questions, and so I will preface this conversation is that we may not have answers just yet, but if we don't have the answers of the questions that you have, go ahead and write them down, and I'd say send them to Mr. John Cooper, J-O-N Cooper, so we can get those answered as quick as possible. But that's all I have. Again, Councilmember Porterfield, thank you so much for getting this meeting together in such a quick manner.
Thank you, Councilman Taylor, and to kind of second what Councilman Taylor said. I met with the administration last week and was given this information, and it was very important to myself and to the administration. And I knew that once Councilman Taylor had his meeting, it would be important to him as well to make sure that all parties had the same information as early on as possible, and with various meetings occurring throughout the rest of this week, and with some council members being out next week for Metro's spring break, and then the following week being a council meeting week, we didn't want to delay this meeting for 2 to 3 weeks. So thank you all so much for your short notice of joining us today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the administration to start the presentation.
Thank you, Councilman. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Mr. Jameson.
Greatly appreciate this opportunity. In a very brief nutshell, we did receive some information from the state that dealt with the Knowles home. And if we learned anything from Bordeaux, rather than learn of a problem and then try to fashion a solution and then come to the council, we thought perhaps better to opt for alerting the council as soon as we know the problem without necessarily having a solution to propose. So that's where we are in all candor today. I also wanted to alert council members that Councilmember Toombs, who would ordinarily be presiding as budget chair, given her day job responsibilities with the state over health facilities, is intentionally not participating just to avoid even any appearance of a conflict of interest. In a nutshell, there were some reporting issues regarding the Knowles home. We wanted to assure council members that this is an extremely sensitive issue, and also that our priority is, you've got a census of over 50 patients, and we're dealing with their lives and the lives of the staff. And our bottom line is we want to do everything we can to assure a successful RFQ. And so my suggestion with respect to the questions that council members have, and I hope this does not prove frustrating, but to avoid any unnecessary concerns, if we could ask that questions perhaps be submitted in writing, and we can go through the council office attorney and working with council members to get questions responded to that are, one, safely and appropriate for us to respond to, and number two, done in a way that doesn't cause any unnecessary discouragement of future bidders. I hope I'm making sense. Does that make sense so far, Council Lee?
Yes, sir, I believe it does.
All right. If that's at all agreeable to council members, to the extent, one, we don't have many answers to share today, but two, just because of potential legal complications and unnecessary deterrence on future bidders, if we can have those questions submitted in writing to through Mr. Cooper, and that will help us greatly. With that, I may ask Ms. Falls if she could summarize just sort of the information that had been provided to the state that sort of led to this meeting.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for sharing in short notice. So, as part of the RFQ process, we've been had some outstanding due diligence items from the current operator. One of which had to do with any regulatory notices that they've received from state or federal authorities. We finally got some of those a weekend before last, and we're surprised by them in no small part because the contract with which we have with the operator requires that they provide us copies of any deficiencies or disciplinary actions by the state within 10 days. And there were a number of deficiencies cited that we had not been made aware of over the course of the last 3 years. Some of them involve life safety issues. I will loosely, as a layperson, lump them into two categories. One category has to do with the physical facility, significant issues relating to fire safety, sprinkler systems, doors not being maintained, electrical wiring, exposed, deficiencies of that nature. The second category, I will describe loosely as getting directly at patient care. And there were a number of complaints that had been received by the state. And as I read it, and this is a layperson's reading of the documentation, having to do with medications not being provided appropriately, not being provided, or incorrect medications being provided in some cases. The facility did not dispute these. They were required to provide remediation, and it has done so in each case. The nature of the problems and the regularity with which they seem to have been happening were cause for concern. Tom Cross and I spoke with members of the state governing body, the Healthcare Facilities Licensing Office last week. Tom, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yes, and their comments were pretty much just as Mary just described, that they have a regular inspection once a year. They weren't able to conduct a one in 2020 because of COVID, but they had gotten plans of correction for all of the issues that they had been cited for and had successfully corrected all of them. I don't believe their 2021 review has taken place yet. That's maybe later in the spring. So there were a series of issues that they appear to have worked through, though it is somewhat troubling that we didn't get the reports as the contract required That said, we're not obligated to enforce the contract in every respect when it's not in Metro's best interests, or those, in this case, of the residents of the facility to do so. So this is mostly information. There's nothing, as far as we know, there's nothing currently outstanding that represents a life safety issue or a patient care issue to the patients, though the history is.
Mr. Cross, we lost you.
I think he was finished, council member. So if there were other comments or questions from you or the council members, we can go from there.
Okay, thank you. And for the record, since we did not have the cameras on, the first individual that was talking was Mary Files with the administration, followed by Tom Cross, who I believe is with Metro Legal. And with that, we will see if any of our council members have any questions about the information that has been presented up to this point. And Councilmember Hurt, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I certainly appreciate it and appreciate us having this opportunity to discuss. So I have a number of questions. Mr. Jameson, you stated that the state informed you all of these violations. Is that correct?
Mike's partly correct, and I hate to correct Mike because he's always right. But originally came to our attention from the operator, and then we reached out to the state. And then Mike is correct. On Friday, we received from the operator a certified copy of documents that they received directly from the state.
So just the operator just arbitrarily reached out to you and said that we have these violations, or how did that?
No, we've been asking for any, as I mentioned, since January 4th, any regulatory communications from the federal or state level, and didn't, have been asking for that and just didn't get it until I guess 9 days ago.
So, but the state is aware and has been for 3 years?
Yes.
And so I just heard Mr. Cross say that there are annual evaluations.
Yes, and the state's file comprises those annual evaluations and requests to the operator to fix things in some instances, then responses from the operator that consists of plans of correction, and then approvals from the state typically about what they plan to do. And in some cases, I believe they may have re-inspected the physical plan issues and acknowledged that everything had been corrected at least to their satisfaction. And so just to summarize how we came by these reports, in the context of developing this request for proposals, we've been doing some due diligence, and one of the things that we wanted to see were files from regulatory agencies dealing with the operation of this facility. And so they had been requested, and we got some, and then we sent a letter asking for the whole file, and that's when they asked the state for their whole file, and they have provided it to us now.
And I think, Councilmember, one thing to that, Councilmember Hurt?
Yes, how often do you dispense funds to the operator?
I didn't hear the question.
Can you repeat that question, Councilmember? We couldn't hear it.
They do receive a subsidy from Metro, correct?
Yeah.
How often? Is it once a year or once every 3 years, or how is it dispensed?
They send a monthly statement. If Councilmember Hurt, I have one comment to add, if you don't mind, to what Tom Cross mentioned to you about the state. May I share that?
Sure.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Files, you're recognized.
Thank you. one key fact is when we spoke with the state last week, they stated that the relationship is between the state and the operator, not Metro as the owner of the property. They were not allowed to share information with us until they were instructed to do so by the operator. So I just wanted to be clear about that.
Okay, so do the state, so that means that, but you directly dispense money to the operator and the state has nothing to do with that?
Correct.
Okay, and so I guess the other thing is that being that this has been some concerns over the past 3 years, and you have been, according to Mr. Cross, there have been some knowledge at the state level, and you're just now finding out about it. So I guess I'm just trying to understand the timing of this becoming important for us to know, or for you to know, before the issues all have been addressed and resolved.
It's
Ms.
fair
Falls or Mr. Jameson, or Mr. Cross, would you like to respond to that?
this is Tom Cross, Madam Chair. It's fair to say that Metro was aware of some of the physical plant issues because, we subsidize the operation there, including their fixing of things that need to be fixed. So though we did not have the state reports itemizing the things that the state regulatory agency required them to fix, it is again fair to say that we understood that there were things that they were doing out there in the plant to try to keep it in operating condition.
Okay. Thank you. It just sound the whole scenario sounds familiar to me, and I just wanted to get a better understanding. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hurt. Do we have any other council members that would like to be recognized?
And Councilmember Porterfield, if I can just echo again, we will gladly welcome and encourage questions submitted in writing to the extent we're kind of on a tightrope without a net at this point. We came to the council at the beginning of the outset of our awareness of problems, not at the end. So we may not have a lot of answers and still have a little trepidation about putting any sort of fear into the market, if you will. So would greatly appreciate the chance to respond to written questions in consultation with council rather than live.
Thank you so very much for that, Mr. Jameson. And I have already submitted some of my questions to you all that I would like answers for. So I would encourage my colleagues to do the same. We don't have any other hands in the queue. Director Crumbo, Mr. Jameson, or Ms. Falls, do you all have anything else that you would like to add? We have Councilmember Hurt. And then I will double back to see if you all have anything that you would like to add. Councilmember Hurt, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the idea of being able to respond thoughtfully. But, if we're going to operate on a transparency level, then oftentimes when people are asked questions and they have to speak from a place of honesty, truth, and transparency, when you do that without there being any forethought, then you tend to receive the most honest response. So I am comfortable and would like to think that the administration is as well in terms of being able to respond immediately to questions being asked, because, you know, for us to have just received this information, this is days before the RFQ goes out, and it just, you know, it just feels a little suspect as far as I'm concerned. And I just, you know, wanted to make that statement because of my questioning. I mean, this is, of course, my first time hearing of it and not knowing it, but just wanting to, you know, just express my my concerns.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Hurt, for sharing those concerns. Councilmember Mendez, you're recognized.
Thank you. Well, in the same spirit of Councilmember Hurt's comment just then, I mean, I think it's worth exploring what the council member thinks. Suspicious of what is the question. I mean, I like everybody else on this call I'm trying to process new information, and I think at least for my processing, it would help me to hear more from Councilmember Hurd about what she's suspecting, and maybe we can get an immediate response from the administration about that. And you know, this is sort of a weird little game we're playing where there's a half a tidbit of information and a half of a tidbit of a response from a council member. I guess I'm trying to figure out more what the argument for suspicion is, so I can think about that harder.
Thank you, Councilman Mendez. Councilmember Hurt, you're recognized.
Thank you. My hand was still up from the last question, but if you want me to respond to Councilmember Mendez's statement, you know, I'll be happy to.
If you would like to, Councilmember Hurt, you're recognized. And if you would not like to, then that's okay too. It's whatever, it's your world, Councilmember Hurt. So whatever you like to do is fine.
So I think that this sounds very similar to what we just recently experienced with Bordeaux Hospital. I also think that it's similar to any allegations that may have been brought up against Nashville General Hospital. So, and all of these healthcare institutions are run by people of color. And it also reminds me of questions that came to Tony Seabram some years ago, or Sam Howard years ago, or Eddie Hamilton. Anyone who's had any type of investment, knowledge, or administration of a healthcare facility, there has always been some question about the actual management of it and what it ends up going. And although there's always some concerns and complaints, there's never the kind of support that is extended in order to ensure that those institutions are running fully funded and fully resourced, whether resources are funds or people, equipment, supplies, all of those things that are required in order to be able to run a healthcare facility sufficiently or better. And again, like I said, it just sounds like the same game, just different players.
Thank you, Councilmember Hurt. Councilmember Mendez, your hand is still up. Would you like to be recognized again?
Yes, thanks. Well, first of all, I appreciate Councilmember Hurt adding some flavor there. And that brings up a couple questions. Maybe Ms. Falls or Mr. Jameson might be the right person. And I could be totally wrong about this. I understood that Knowles, the Anthem, who is operating Knowles, more or less has a blank check from Metro right now, and there isn't a cap on the subsidy. Am I wrong about that?
You are not wrong. That is correct.
All right. So for them to comply with whatever they're supposed to comply with, they literally have a blank check from Metro. Thank you, Mr. Jameson. And then the other thing, if I'm hearing who's doing the complaining or who owes the obligation to who, I'm hearing that Anthem, the operator, owes a reporting obligation to the state that, and Mr. Jameson, am I right so far? That's what we're talking about, an Anthem reporting obligation to the state?
Anthem, as I understood from Mr. Cross, has a contractual reporting obligation to Metro.
That is correct. Now, I'm sure they have reporting obligations to the state as well, but they certainly have one to us.
Well, help me out again then. What's the, I was hearing earlier that they were, had certain problems with the state that have not been reported to us, to Metro previously. So there's two aspects to it, not being in compliance with obligations to the state as a regulator, and then secondly, not telling us about it. Is that, I got that right?
That's a good summary. And let me be clear that they appear to have resolved the issues that the state raised with them, both as to the condition of the physical plant and as to resident care. But our contract with them requires that they provide us notice of any reports or regulatory inquiries they get from the state or federal government. And we did not receive those as the contract requires until we asked for them in connection with the development of this RFP.
Okay, so as of right now, there is what are now prior and resolved issues with state regulators, and they failed to let Metro know pursuant to the contract terms in real time about those regulatory problems with the state. Is that a better description?
Correct. What was your?
All right. Back to where Councilmember Hurt was. Again, I appreciate the additional information with Knowles having a blank check with Metro, or Anthem having a blank check with Metro. If they got problems, it's on them. I'm glad to hear they got their regulatory issues worked out with the state. I do kind of wish they'd honor their contract and tell us in real time. That's it, Chair Warfield.
Thank you so very much, Councilmember Mendez. And just to just kind of clear up any questions that individuals may be having, Mr. Jameson or Mr. Cross or Ms. Falls, if you could just let us know what has happened up to this point. Is there anything that would stop the current provider from looking to renew their contract, and if they do look to renew their contract, could we add some type of clause in the contract that would, cover or provide for if they are in violation of their contract in the future, if they don't let us know within the reporting time in the future, like what that penalty would potentially be?
The short answer for me, and I'm looking around the room to see if I'm contradicted, is I don't know. Again, we are reporting this to the committee chairs upon learning of it, and not upon fashioning all of the repercussions of it. So have I gone through the current Anthem Care contract to find out if this disqualifies them? No. What I would want to encourage council members, in addition to your written questions, is the two resounding after effects from Bordeaux there were council members who would comment to me that we did nothing to encourage bids on Bordeaux, and council members who had said to me, Stewart, that we had besmirched the then current operator to discourage further operations. So in response to that, I can only deny that so many times, but with respect to Knowles, we are hereby beseeching you for your assistance in locating bidders. It'll go out through the usual procurement process, pretty widespread, broad approach, but I make sure we have precluded any suspicions down the road that there wasn't a step we didn't take or a stone that we left unturned in looking for a potential bidder, because our fear is that the indications are there is none. There are no interested third parties that we're aware of to date, and that makes us a little concerned, and we're asking for your partnership in making sure it doesn't happen.
Thank you, Mr. Jamison. And one question that I did pose for the administration that I am asking them to gather the information, but I am asking that they gather in the event that there are no bidders for the contract, if Metro needs to look at considering taking over the facilities, if we can get information on what that will potentially look like and the potential cost of that. So I'm not asking for an answer for that today, but I am asking that that information is prepared to be presented to the Budget Committee. Councilmember Hurt. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Understood. I think Mr. Crumbo is exploring that answer. I'm sure it'll take some time, but I believe he's on it.
Thank you, Mr. Jamison. Councilmember Hurt, is that an old hand or would you like to be recognized again?
It's a new hand. Thank you very much. So,
you're recognized.
So I know, thank you, Madam Chair. I know that with Metro and the state, oftentimes they do grants, but they may be reimbursable. You know, where you spend the money first and then they will reimburse you for the money spent. Are the funds given to Anthem reimbursable? Is it on that reimbursable track, or do they get the money up front?
I believe I hear Mr. Cross in the background, but it looks like Director Crumbo would like to be recognized, so you are recognized.
I don't want to interrupt. Cross, Tom, did you have a comment there?
I'm sure you'll have a more thorough response to this, but in general, we reimburse them for costs that they have incurred.
So, Council Lady Porterfield, thanks for recognizing me. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. You're good to go.
So I'm just going to provide some general comment here today for the group that's gathered. So Council Lady Porterfield contacted me Friday and let me know that she would be moving into this role here in place of Council Lady Toombs, who it sounds like has a conflict due to her workplace. And so I shared with her at the time that I've not been immersed in Knowles or Bordeaux very deeply, but because this seems to be coming around rather quickly, that I would be here with you today and provide a little bit of perspective. And so what that perspective really is the role that finance has played. And that is first, we do ensure that the checks are written to Anthem. Those are written on time. Since I've been here in my 17 months or so, there have been a few hiccups there, and we've helped Anthem with a few specific issues that come around. But our day-to-day role is mostly that, a little bit of oversight beyond it. Here, we're being asked to take a more active role with the procurement here, perhaps in the new operator, perhaps for the one we have. It'll be a general process, and in order to bring that around and get it started, the mayor's office, Metro Legal, and so forth are working on a contract to operate that facility, which would be, fitting for where we are with that facility all in. And what I mean by that is when we look at the facility itself, it is one of our public properties. It sounds like there's a fair amount of capital that would need to be expended in order to maintain what is there and probably upgrade that facility and really move it into the future if that indeed is what we decide to do, as well as looking at what is truly the operating cost based on the volume that it has today on up to its capacity, which I understand is roughly 100 or so residents there. And so we're going to help with that procurement process. I really don't have any knowledge to share with you at this moment as to whether there will or will not be bidders for that based on the information that's going to go forward. That's in the works here, as you can really tell. And then with respect to Councilor Porterfield's question on whether, if there are no bidders or at least ones that we would like to operate it, is it feasible really for Metro to absorb those operations? And what I can tell you about that right now is at first, I think we could assume, any kind of operations, we wanted to hire people and employ them to get that job done. But we really don't have the expertise inside of the finance department to make a determination as to whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. We're just not experts in the healthcare industry. So I'll need to think about that question a little bit and determine if there are other resources across the Metro government would be helpful in reaching that, or it may be to get to that, we would need to get some expertise here in order to help us think through that. But as close as we get to that in finance is just my own experience prior to the Metro government and working around these facilities and healthcare generally. But I don't know that that's really sufficient for the question that's at hand here. So all of that to say, finance has had, more or less a maintenance role to get the bills paid and a bit of oversight beyond that. Traditionally, we will be glad to support this procurement process, however that comes around. I'm not clear yet on the timing of that and how it may play out. And then again, Councilor Porterfield, with respect to your question as to whether Metro could actually operate it itself, I just have some thinking to do as to how we would come around to that. So I hope that helps here at the beginning of this. I say that at the beginning as if there's all the time in the world, but with a contract with the current operator that's going to expire, I understand this summer, I think truly we're going to be scrambling here a bit to determine what those next steps are and to set those in motion.
Thank you so much, Director Crumbo. And for the just for clarity's sake, my comment was more so wondering if there are no bidders, and hopefully we will have bidders. Hopefully we will have people bidding on this contract so that we can continue operating in the manner that we are. But in the event that we don't have bidders, wanting to make sure that the residents are still taken care of. If plans A, B, C, D, E, F, and G fall through, if Metro were to take over, what would that look like financially? Could there be like a partnership with, for example, Metro General or any departments of Metro? Of course, that wouldn't fall under finance, but would there be, could there just start some conversation around that so that we could know in the event that no one is interested in the contract, what our options would be. So just to kind of clear that question up. And Councilmember Welsh, I see that your hand is up, so you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. This is Councilmember Jenny Welsh. I just had more of a procedural question, and I'm not sure who really to direct this to, but I'm just wondering why now it is a conflict for Councilmember Toombs to be involved in this particular meeting and this issue when she has introduced legislation in relation to Knowles. I'm just trying to find out what the line is, why suddenly that is a problem for her to be involved in this as chair of the Budget Committee. And again, I'm not quite sure who I should direct that to. Mr. Jameson, perhaps?
Sure.
We'll give that to Mr. Jameson.
I'll at least start the answer and probably get it half wrong. But when we received the information and to Mary's point, we're requesting information and then received additional information from the state. We contacted Councilmember Toombs, but then the state, and I'm going to defer to Mary here a little bit, the state explicitly indicated that we should not go into detail with Councilmember Toombs because her day job is such that this could land on her desk. And so we nevertheless contacted Councilmember Toombs just to give her the very broad parameters of what we understood, and then sought her permission to, instead of going through her and posing a conflict for her per the state authorities, could we contact her vice chair on budget, Councilmember Porterfield, and the health committee chair in lieu of, and she approved that step, and that's what we did.
Councilmember Welsh, did that answer your question?
It did, and maybe just for clarification, with that same potential conflict does not continue through like introducing legislation related to Knowles or other things that might end up on her desk, just for clarification?
Did not receive any sort of instruction or commentary from the authorities in her office at the state on her legislation, and leave it to council members to assess if they have any particular conflicts from their day-to-day employment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jameson. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilmember Welsh. Councilmember Mendez, you're recognized.
Thanks, Councilmember Porterfield. I just wanted to follow up on one comment that you made a couple minutes ago about trying to look forward, and depending on how things develop, I think you were talking about if there aren't any bidders, what the options are. I would underscore that I would ask Mr. Jameson, Ms. Falls, Mr. Crumbo, as necessary, to really help us look forward on what those options might be, because now that we created these additional checks and balances in the recent legislation, one of the things that the legislation was designed to do was to make things go slower, to make it so the council would have a voice under certain circumstances for how things play out for Knowles. And in order to make decisions more effectively, I think knowing what the options are sooner rather than later would be better. In particular, based on some law experience I have, it would strike me as wildly unreasonable to think that Nashville General Hospital could operate the place effectively. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I would think that that's the sort of thing that if council members are going to be curious about that, if there end up not being a lot of bidders, that's a thing that we want to get to the bottom of sooner rather than later. I don't know whether there's subject matter experts to bring in or how we end up vetting those ideas, but now that we've built in the mechanisms we've built in, I would think that we ought to have more clarity sooner rather than later about what those options might be if there aren't successful bidders. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilman Mendez. Director Crumbo, is that an old hand, or would you like to be recognized again?
If I could be recognized just one more time here.
You are recognized.
So, well, thank you. And Councilman Mendez was talking about timeline a moment ago, and I think generally he and some others have mentioned the thoughtfulness that's here. The reality of our timeline really is that we've got a contract with the current operator that's going to expire this summer. A normal procurement process for something like this would be about 120 days. And for this one, it's obviously a priority. We certainly have residents, patients on the other end of this, and we'll make it a priority. And so when I say it feels like we're at the beginning of something with all of this coming together, we are going to have to hustle and scramble here a bit in order to make a procurement process, a reasonable one, happen before the existing contract really would expire. And so I'll make every effort to ensure that that happens. Also make sure that all I's are dotted and T's are crossed, as the saying goes, with the process. I know there's been some grumbling about the Bordeaux process, but I am told that did accomplish that objective on an accelerated timeline. And so here we'll make every effort to make that the same. And then you didn't invite this comment, but I feel compelled to make it. I don't want to interfere with anyone's view on your own council conflicts, business conflicts, and things that arise, but I can tell you from 30 years of professional experience before arriving here, conflicts can be a nebulous thing, and you can be in the middle of one before you realize it. I truly admire Council Lady Toombs, if she's kind of stumbled upon one here, bringing around this process, handing the baton over to Council Lady Porterfield, and really support her decision to do that. And I've had just the pleasure of working with her now in my 17 months here, and I'm sure she will do a good job managing it here with you as the council, as well as with the state. And even though she's not here to comment, I thank her for recognizing whatever conflict she has and making a good handoff to you.
Thank you so very much, Director Crumbo. I too think Councilmember Toombs has done a great job in that respect and in other respects as well. I do not see any other hands in the queue. Mr. Jameson, could you speak a little bit on the timeline moving forward and how council members can help the process with regards to making sure that RFQ gets out there and making sure that it reaches far and wide looking for potential bidders?
Sure, and just sort of speaking off the top of my head, what I think we would suggest is we'll proceed with the RFQ just as we were previously. The Anthem Care contract expiration isn't until late June. Have the RFQ go out, but this time perhaps copy every single council member in advance and urge their assistance, if you will. And I certainly do not expect council members to have close friends within the healthcare industry, but every opportunity helps. And to the extent you can share it with friends near and far and acquaintances and anybody that might be of interest, that would be helpful to us. Just on a very anecdotal level here, we have, in the course of speaking with local healthcare providers, when we mention Knowles, there has not been a single nibble, if you will, which concerns us a little bit, obviously, in terms of what that may mean. But for those reasons, we'll be actively soliciting the council members' assistance and making sure this gets spread far and wide, and that we receive as many bids as we can realistically expect.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Jameson. And Ms. Falls, did you have anything that you wanted to share before we close out? And then I will go to Councilmember Taylor to see if he has any last words before we close out.
Thank you, Chair Lady. I just want, building on what Mike said, on February 9th, we sent notice of the impending RFQ to every assisted living facility in the state of Tennessee. I think it was 145 of them. And to date, we've not heard any expressions of interest. So again, to the extent you all have access to quality operators, we would love to talk to them.
Thank you so very much for that, Ms. Falls. And Councilman Taylor, would you like to share any closing thoughts?
Thank you, Councilmember Porterfield. One of the main things is as we continue to have this conversation, just please send any additional questions that you may have. And in regards to Health and Hospitals Committee, I'll definitely plan to keep this. I'll definitely plan to keep this at the forefront of our conversations. I know we've been trying to do a good job to, as best a job as we could, to get the information out to you. So we have as much information that we can. And so that's all that I have. Thank you to Metro Legal and Administration for joining us today.
Thank you so very much, Chair Taylor. And with that, we are going to adjourn our meeting. Again, if you all have any additional questions, please direct those to J.O.N. Cooper, and we will continue, such as Health and Hospitals, we will continue to make sure that Budget and Finance is abreast of what's happening as we get more information. So thank you all again, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you so much.